So it looks like we are right at 10 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar. So welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for attending. And today's webinar, as you know, examples of using iMapInvasives is going to talk a lot about not just how the program, how iMapInvasives, the functionality works, but just talking also about real-life examples of how it can be used and how it is being used. I'm going to open up the perspective for each of you with work with invasive species and how this program can be used and tailored to what you would like to accomplish. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'll incorporate a few breaks throughout the training since we are scheduled to go till noon today, so you can have an opportunity to ask questions. We also do have two guest presenters that will be talking today. So after each of their presentations or their parts during today's talk, I will allow a short time for questions for them, and then also at the very end, there will be opportunity for questions as we go through. Okay, about iMapInvasives. What is this program about? What are the goals? And what are some of its key components? We want to make sure that we address this at the very beginning before we go into some of our examples. So the iMapInvasives program, some of you might know this and some of you might not, is part of the Natural Heritage Network, at least based on the current state provinces that are participating. Are part of a natural heritage program. And if you're not familiar with the natural heritage programs, these are organizations that are all very similar in the work that they do, where they focus their efforts on protecting rare, threatened, and endangered species. And the programs are part of NatureServe, which is a national organization that connects science with conservation. And so part of the folks in the programs that are part of Heritage encompass all of the United States. Each state has a program, all of Canada, and also Latin America. So it's a very large and broad network, and iMapInvasives fits well into this because, of course, we are very focused on invasive species, and the Heritage programs are very focused on the native, rare, threatened, and endangered species. And so because the invasives have there's a severe threat to our native species. This is it's a good link in order that these two programs can be working together in that regard. Just a little bit more on what some of the heritage programs do. I'll go through the list. They inventory their state or their province or their street in search of these species, the rare, threatened, and endangered species. And that includes plants, animals, and also the natural communities that these species live in. So are identifying areas of ecological importance, from data to state and provincial agencies, landowners, and local and municipal players. Maps is a really big thing, using that information, creating maps, and sharing that information in that way, as well as other reference materials. And we also provide management recommendations for how best go about protecting species and over conservation efforts. And, of course, educating the general public about the resources that surround us every day and things that might not always know about, but these are species that are very important, and, of course, the general public needs to know about that. So that's something just to keep in mind, that iMapInvasives, where we're based out of here in Pennsylvania and other states and provinces, we are all part of a natural heritage program. To give you a little bit more of a snapshot, I like this visual. The Natural Heritage Program here in Pennsylvania strives to protect places that look like this. So they're very beautiful, they're very rich in diversity, no invasive species, and iMapInvasives then strives to protect these places from being overrun with invasive species. So we want to keep them pristine, we want to keep them in good condition. And so that's the link between the heritage programs and iMapInvasives. So I'll tell you more about what the program is all about. So it is an online database that's geared towards natural resource professionals and citizen scientists who have an interest in tracking where invasive species are being found, as well as management efforts that are related to eradication, control, and of course suppression of different populations. And we also have a mobile app that's available. And one of our guest speakers will be talking specifically about the mobile app and how he is using that to find and record where he's finding invasive species. So iMapInvasives is somewhat niche-based in that each of the member programs that are participating are really only interested in tracking species in their state or their province. And so this is important because when you have a focus like that, you're not necessarily looking at every single state and every single province, more niche in that you're looking just at that one area. You can be more in tune with high priority species or species that we like to call emerging threats, which are species that are not yet in your state but are in surrounding states and very well come into, for example, Pennsylvania. And so actually our heritage program just created a brochure this year that talks about 12 emerging invasive threats that are on the horizon for Pennsylvania to be aware of. So again, because we are focused just on Pennsylvania, we have information, we have that knowledge, and we can then pass that on to our users. And so if you are interested in that information or looking at that brochure, that's available on the PEI iMapInvasives website, or you can always talk to me afterwards and I can send you that brochure. Because we are niche-based, there's 3 people here in Pennsylvania, including myself and 2 other people that are the main people in charge of the iMapInvasives program. And again, we are very knowledgeable about the specific species and the threats that are impacting Pennsylvania. And so to myself, Mary Walsh, and Kirsten Carlson also help to administer iMapInvasives here in Pennsylvania. And together we all have knowledge and experience in botany, ecology, and various invasive species eradication programs. So we come to this program, the platform here with iMap, with that knowledge and that experience in our tool belt, which only helps to make the program that much stronger and that much more usable to you guys as the users. To point out, because sometimes this question comes up, iMapInvasives is free to use. There is no cost to you as the user. And so to get started using it, if you guys, some of you may or may not have login accounts already, you can request a login account right on our webpage. There's a link here when I send out a PDF of this PowerPoint presentation afterwards today. You can click on that link and it will take you right there. For those of you who don't have a login account already, I'll be sure to set you up with one after the training today, so you don't have to worry about doing that. So there's cost and it's free to use to you. I want to point out, because sometimes people aren't always aware of this, iMapInvasives was designed and created, used for non-commercial uses only. So really, the purpose is to use it to help promote educational and informational purposes, and commercial use is strictly prohibited. So some examples of some approved uses when you use iMap are some of the following. So documentation of invasive species and management efforts, and the sharing of that information with partners and other registered users. So you're finding invasive species and we're managing them. Documenting that information, of course, is one of the main goals of the program, and so, of course, we encourage that. And treatment prioritization, so using the information that we already have in iMap from you as a user or other users, and using that information to guide your path forward as far as where you want to prioritize treatment and the extent of infestations. Also have several people that are using iMap to do scientific or academic research, and we'll talk more about some of those specific examples as we go through the training today. And also some projects involving species distribution modeling, where you will essentially use information, current location information, and an understanding of a species habitat essentially predict where you will find it in other places where it hasn't already been reported. That is also something that is in the works right now with a few people from various universities here in Pennsylvania. Examples of reasons why people might use it that we do not allow include the following. Using the data to get an environmental or a building permit. We do not want you to use the data for that purpose. Even though we stand by the data and with this is good and trustworthy information, it is not intended to be used for gathering data to then get a permit for. So do not use the information for that reason. Also, if you might be an environmental consultant, use information to then gain new clients or essentially to profit from that information. So the thing to remember here is do not use this information that as it pertains to laws or permits or profiting if you have a business of some sort. So just keep in mind that for purposes of this program, we want it to be used for informational and educational purposes only. Okay, so let's talk more about some of the goals and how the program is designed to benefit the natural resource professionals and citizen scientists here in our state. So the goal is to provide a platform, a user-friendly mechanism that you can use to document where you're finding invasive species and the management efforts that you may be a part of to help to control or eradicate them. So of course it provides that basic platform. But in addition to that platform, we like to get information from a broad base of data providers. So essentially, we're not just getting information from state agencies, we're not just getting information from local groups, we're getting information from all of these places. So some examples are state agencies and nonprofits, but also conservation districts. Every state, every county in Pennsylvania has a county conservation district, and so we are getting information from those groups. We have some teachers that are interested in invasive species and teaching their students about that, and so sometimes, depending on programs that are out there, we do get data coming from school groups. Also, we do information coming from consultants, environmental consultants, people who are just all-around naturalists and like to be outside. So those would be our citizen scientists. It's also museum and herbarium data. So we have this broad base of data, which helps to make it stronger because it's coming from various sources, and it really helps to diversify the database in that regard. So just in general, the database really helps to increase users' understanding of where species are being found, and because of that, diversification of our data sources. And so we're getting information from people who are seeing things that maybe a professional isn't. Again, that citizen scientist component is important. It really helps to build a foundation that you need to then, if you're like a manager, a land manager, you're going to need to then go and conduct effective treatment measures. So again, this is really a great source to come to if you want to go and do some type of management effort, going into IMAP and looking to see what data is available in there already is always a good starting point. And if there's any information for a specific region that you're interested in, that's okay. We always encourage you to be one of the first people to then go and actually incorporate some data into the database so that other users can benefit from that. So we like to say that, again, kind of go off the example of the foundation that I just gave, iMapInvasives really helps to guide effort of land managers now and in the future by providing that spatial information of existing infestations and the threat that they pose to surrounding native species. For example, here you see a yellow polygon. This is an assessment polygon, and this is taking a user who would go into IMAP and find this to say there's already an infestation here, and I'm just hypothetically speaking that maybe this is for zebra mussels, And so you would know going into that area that zebra mussels were here, here is the extent of their infestation, and that's something to keep in mind for your own management efforts to help to guide and to plan them more appropriately. Something that I think some people don't always realize that iMapInvasives can be used for is to connect different individuals and organizations just by having data documented in iMap from those different groups. So essentially, if you're a user and you're from a particular organization and you log in and you're looking at a certain area and you see that someone else has already done work there, maybe they're also managing a species that you are interested in managing, that essentially be a partnership that you then get in touch with that organization and say, hey, I saw that you are managing this species, maybe Japanese knotweed, for example, and I'm also interested in treating that species in this same area. Maybe we can work together on a current project or a future project because we have similar risks and similar management goals. Another way that the can be used is to be a connecting tool that then you can build a bridge between you and another organization that might be doing similar efforts or working in a similar area. Another really neat thing about iMap is it helps you as either a land manager or a citizen scientist to stay aware of high priority invasive species that are being found in our state. And you have a lot of species that fall under that category. So high priority essentially is meaning this is a species that is a severe threat to our native species. It's one that might be really aggressive and is known to spread quickly, and so that we want to keep an eye on and hopefully incorporate some management efforts for as soon as possible. So an example of a high priority species here in Pennsylvania is pictured off here. It's called wavy leaf basket grass. And it's been known to be from Maryland for some time now, but just last year in the fall, it was found in Pennsylvania for the very first time. And so information for that finding logged into iMapInvasives. And now from here on out, that information is available to anyone who might be interested in learning distribution of the species so far in our state, since it is just very new and it is unfortunately spreading. And once that it does spread here, you can see in the photo, there's a picture of someone's dog and they're in a park or somewhere where the wavy leaf basket grass was, and seeds attached to all over the dog. So it's unfortunately an easy way for this particular species to spread. And so one that we try to educate people on as much as possible is to, watch as you're coming out of an area that your pets don't have any of these seeds on them, that shoes or your pants or other items of clothing are decontaminated essentially, so that you aren't helping to spread this particular species, which is definitely a big threat to our native species. So there's one of the goals of the program, but I want to talk about some of the key components of iMap and how these certain components make iMap stand apart from other particular databases, other ones that are out there that also track invasive species. So what are key components? So we did this one a little bit already, but I do want to mention it again. We do have this particular focus just on our state. And other databases that are out there typically are either at a local scale or a national scale, and they aren't necessarily just at this whole statewide. And so that's a nice thing about iMap is we're really only concerned about what we're finding here in Pennsylvania. And so, again, we're honed in on those reports that we get for high priority and early detection species. We are forwarding that information on to the appropriate individuals, whether they're with a state agency or a nonprofit or another appropriate group. So an example of this is if you get a report, say, for example, giant hogweed, which is a noxious weed here in our state, information would get forwarded on to the Department of Agriculture here in Pennsylvania, because they are the regulating authority on all of the noxious weeds here in Pennsylvania. And that information is not going to just sit in the database. We make sure to forward that on to the appropriate people so that they can then take action and make sure that this finding by whomever found it is going to be used in the best and most appropriate way possible. Another key component is to have that information for species that are newly arrived. By setting up email alerts, you can be aware of these findings the following day when a record is confirmed in the database. And so again, we really focus on ensuring that our users are staying up to date on the information that's getting cataloged into the database, because we want information not to sit, but we want it to be utilized by the people who are able to go out and do those management efforts to then actually hopefully suppress or eradicate those populations. For those of you who may already be IMAP users but you don't have email alerts set up, I would definitely encourage you to do so. And we will talk a little bit more about the specific email alerts we have available as we go through today's training. But just keep that in mind that entering and viewing data is only one component of the database. These email alerts, a whole new component that is really helpful, especially if you're a land manager. Okay, this is one we sort of talked about already, but again, I do want to highlight it that the data in iMap, again, it's not there just to sit and be used, as people see fit, but just to also use it to prioritize your survey and your treatment efforts. So if you look at the data that's being cataloged in your region, you see those species that are going to be the most impacted to particular native species in your area, and then that information can then be used for future treatment efforts that you or maybe some of your partnering organizations are going to be doing. So here this is a picture of water chestnut, which is invasive aquatic plant. And, particularly the people could have used iMap to say, oh, there's water chestnut here. We weren't aware of that. Now we know that we want to go and tackle that infestation. Or maybe they weren't aware of the extent of the infestation. Again, all that information, if it can be documented, can be useful not only for you if you're a manager, but to other people in your region as well. So it's really beneficial all around. Again, iMap is a really important networking tool. So you can use it to meet those potential partners that you might want to collaborate with on upcoming projects. Again, looking at data that's already been submitted and understanding that is maybe a potential partnership that you can form based on similar interests for a species that you might be managing, or for just the simple fact that you're located in a similar area. So how you might do that. We do have in iMap an option to create reports based on information that you might query for. So, for example, you use the report function in an organization near you that's managing Japanese knotweed, which is another species that you're also managing. So after creating that report, the results that will show up are indicate that now, according to the data we have, there are 8 other organizations that are also treating or have treated Japanese knotweed. So that's something that's important to you. If you want to have a better understanding of who is treating what, this is a way to get at that information. And having that goal of forming a new partnership with somebody else. A better idea of who is currently participating with the iMaplnvasives program, here is a map showing various states, and we have Saskatchewan up in Canada that are also participating. So these are neighbors as far as iMap goes. One of the nice things about the way iMap is set up is here in Pennsylvania, we have several neighbors. So we have New York, we have West Virginia, and then far up in New England, we have Vermont and Maine. So particularly, for example, New York, if you're located in the northern part of Pennsylvania, it'd be really relevant to know what species are being found on the border between you and New York. And so you can actually do that in iMap. And I think there might be a few screenshots later on in the training that you can see. But essentially, you're able to see if maybe a species that's new in Pennsylvania came because it was already found in New York and now it's heading southward. So that's an available capability that you're able to see data coming in potentially from other states that are now entering Pennsylvania. So here's several surrounding states here just around Pennsylvania are known to have a species called Asiatic sand sedge, and one is not currently found in Pennsylvania as far as we know. With the help of iMap, it's easy to see just how close this species has been found to the Pennsylvania border in preparation for rapid response. So if you were to look that species up in our database, you could get more information regarding where it's found in other states. Okay, so let's talk more about some of the tools that are available. We talked about some of the goals and the key components of the program, but let's talk more specifically about some of the tools that it offers. The big things and kind of the basic part of the program, I provide you with a way to document your invasive species findings and your management efforts, and that is done through 5 different data types, with observation, assessment, survey, treatment, and infestation management. I'm going to go through and we'll talk about each of those data types and how you can use them to record what you are finding or what you are doing. So the observation, and this is, as many of you probably know already, the way you record where you find a specific species at. So this, because iMap is an all-taxa database, you can report findings for any invasive species. That includes any animal, any plant, and any insect. We do not track pathogens. That's the one thing that could potentially be considered invasive that we do not track, but we track everything else. Another thing I'd like to point out, because this question comes up sometimes, is I like to tell people that it's important to document the rare findings and common findings of various invasive species. And what I mean by that is a rare species, or like a high priority invasive species, of course, is very important to document, maybe because it's new to the state or it's an aggressive species that will spread rapidly and it's one we want to keep close tabs on. But some might be considered really common and widespread, like Japanese knotweed or multiflora rose. These are that are also important to document, and the reason for that is, of course, it really is important to know where these species are, but it's helpful to help fill in our database and the gaps that we might have for some of these species. So maybe, for example, in Blair County, we have probably a whole lot of Japanese knotweed, and maybe in the database that isn't reflecting yet because we just haven't gotten the data to support that information. So by reporting where you're finding common invasive species, that will help to paint the picture to say, yes, this county definitely does have this species, and again, will help to strengthen the database even more. Okay, so another data type that we offer is called an assessment record, and this is a type of this is information that's used to essentially document the impacts that are being caused by an invasive species to a particular location or area. Some reasons why you might want to capture assessment data might include some of these reasons. So have an initial understanding of what the threats are to a certain area, understanding the intensity of an infestation, also understanding the damage that's being caused by that invasive species, details about the surrounding area, and also people will use assessment information to document pre- and post-treatments. So going beforehand and outlining what you find, and then afterwards, after treatment has been conducted, going back in and basically looking to see if the treatment was successful. So hopefully your treated area shrank in size because, or for future treatments, that area would hopefully be smaller because the treatment was successful. So a hypothetical example of the information that you could document in a assessment record would be something like this, where you had an area that was being choked out by common reed, which is commonly known as Phragmites. So the damage being caused to that area is that native species will essentially be unable to grow there. So here you can see in the photo on this slide, the photo of what Phragmites can look like. It can be very tall, it forms a complete monoculture, and it doesn't allow anything else to grow there. So of course the native seed bank really can't do very much until this species gets wiped out. As you might want to include would be that this is a wetland area and some species are present. So again, it's really important to try to protect that area because of these rare species being there. You would then say, as follow-up, after I've created this assessment record, now I see that we need to go in and do treatment, bring back that native seed bank. Okay, the assessment record essentially is going to outline the area that's being impacted. It's going to talk about the main species that are a threat. So for this example, it's going to be Phragmites, that's being caused, the details about the surrounding area, and what you're going to do next. So that's assessment record. The next type of data that we have that's available is called a survey. As the name implies, this is a data type that you can use where you outline an area that you did a search of either a particular invasive species or multiple, and a place where you can document both the presence, so when you're finding certain species, or the absence, when you look for something and you did not find it. All that information can be cataloged in a survey. The reason why you might want to create a survey. A lot of people in Pennsylvania and other states do events called bioblitzes. These are events where you can go out in a 20-year period in a pre-selected location and essentially document every living thing that you're finding to then use that information and better understand the natural living things that are there, and maybe to understand what needs to be protected, what should be treated, and so forth. And so we will often get invasive species data, different bioblitzes that are held throughout the year. A way that you could use to capture the data collected at a bioblitz. Also understanding, using both that presence and absence information to understand species distribution statewide or at a local scale. Also, if you are someone who helps to volunteer either in your local park or if you're someone who manages a land preserve, survey information can help you understand what species are causing negative impacts to natural resources in that particular area. Also, it might be a way to help to document the species that are being found in an area to help to maintain and protect the native biodiversity that is there. So again, these are all reasons why you may want to create a survey, and probably a lot more reasons that I haven't listed here, but this is the data type you would use to do that. So here's another hypothetical example of how you use a survey. So say your goal is to go out and search for the presence or the absence of hydrilla, which is another aquatic invasive plant, and looking in the state parks that are located in Luzerne and Sullivan counties. So that's your goal. So out and you do that survey, you see that you did not find hydrilla at any of these survey sites, but just because you didn't find it doesn't mean that you can't then go in and create a survey record, because absence data is still data that you want to potentially collect. And so if you would go in and create that record, so you would draw a polygon around the area that you looked and put in some details such as you performed the survey using the rake toss method, which is where you essentially have a rake with a rope tied to it, and you throw it in the water and you haul it back out and you see what's attached to it. And that's at each of the locations that you surveyed. So that would be kind of a hypothetical example of how the survey record could be used. So treatment, this is another really important data type, often very much utilized by folks that are out doing management of land or preserves. In IMAP, there are several ways that you can document the type of treatment effort that you did. So the options that we have available pretty much cover all different types of treatment that people are doing. Most commonly, people are using chemicals to do work, but also people will do hand pooling efforts. Another thing that's happening here in the Pittsburgh area and probably other places too are goats, where there's actually a company that you can rent goats from to do grazing on invasive species. People will also use prescribed burns in areas where that's appropriate to do. Some places you can actually install barriers, whether that's a piece of cardboard or a rubber mat, that essentially will block the sunlight so that the plant underneath that barrier cannot survive because of that. We'll use biocontrols, so very specific insects or pathogens that are targets to go after certain invasive species. So there's biocontrols currently available for species like hemlock woolly adelgid and also purple loosestrife. And if the species that you're targeting is something like feral swine, organized hunt is an appropriate treatment option. So another hypothetical example, and we'll use the goats for this one, is say you have an area, a 2-acre population of Japanese knotweed on land that is owned by a public school. And so you think that the most appropriate method to go about treating that Japanese knotweed isn't necessarily by chemicals, because it's on school property, and so you don't want the children to be impacted by that. But instead, you choose to rent goats from a company here in Pittsburgh called Allegheny Goatscape. And so there's 2 goats. They go out to the property for a 2-week period, and they graze away, and they eat all the invasive species and hopefully do a really good job of it. And something else you might want to mention is particular treatment record is that one part of the property had rare species on it, some rare native species, and so you want to ensure that this area is protected from the goats while they're out doing their thing. Again, this is just another hypothetical example of how you could potentially use the treatment record to outline that 2-acre parcel, talk about the goats and the work that they did, and then go on to say if they were successful or not, which hopefully they were. And the data type that we have available in IMAP is called the infestation management record. And this is one that it's not exactly a data type by itself, but it's a way to group these other different types of data together into one place, essentially. Okay, so it's going to take all of the observations, the assessments, the surveys, and the treatments of one particular species in a certain area and pull them all together so that you have a much better idea of what's happening in an area with a particular species. So some examples of how the IMR, as I'm going to refer to it, because it's just a mouthful to say, so how you could use the IMR would be, for example, if you are part of stewardship staff at a local land trust and you protect several properties and steward them, and you want to know where in the management process each of those properties is at. So property number 1 was surveyed last year and treatment scheduled this year. So that IMR is going to essentially group all that information together so that you can then plan or prioritize and say, okay, we've done the survey, now we need to do the treatment. So you can see the information together in one place. Part 2 was treated last year, and a follow-up assessment or survey needs to be done this year. Again, that information to prioritize or understand what's already been done and what needs to be done from here. An example of how you could use the IMR is if you are perhaps a watershed specialist or someone working around a water body. And for this example, we'll say it's a reservoir that was recently surveyed for water chestnut, and it was surveyed in sections of the water body. And each section was then recorded as an individual survey. Combining all of these different surveys together in the IMR, you then see the total area of that reservoir that was surveyed And also see a timeline of how long water chestnut was known to exist there, because you'll have the observation data as well as the dates for the surveys. And so that's essentially going to piece together a timeline for you. You can better understand how long you've been surveying there and how long water chestnut has been known to exist there. So those are some examples to kind of help you better understand the IMR can be used for, and the examples of that are almost limitless. Here's an example, another hypothetical for you. So say there's Japanese knotweed that's present on land that's owned by a land trust, and it's invading an area along a riverbank. This is going to be a threat to the native biodiversity that's found there because, as many of you know, Japanese knotweed can very easily form a monoculture. It doesn't allow other species to grow there, and it's also, especially in riparian areas, it's a soil eroder. It can actually really harm the stream banks and the species that are living there. And so essentially this area has been studied both with mechanical and chemical methods over several years to hopefully try to eradicate this population. So you have all this data, all these efforts together in one place so you can get a better understanding of what's happened and the timeline that it's happened over. So you combine all of the observation, assessment, and treatment periods that occurred for Japanese knotweed in this particular area. And you can then gain from that, you as that stewardship manager can prioritize areas to be treated in the future if that's something that you want to continue doing, because of understanding of what's already been treated and have that information of the size of the post-treatment assessments, which would then be created to say, we did this treatment, now we did an assessment of that area that was treated, and I can see that that polygon has shrunk or it's smaller, and I now know that that treatment was successful based on the smaller area that now also needs to be go back to. Okay. So this is another a hypothetical example of how you might want to use that to gather all of your information together into one place. Okay, I just want to stop here for just a little bit. Is there any questions so far about what we've talked about? So we'll keep going. There'll be more opportunities for questions if you guys do have them. So the second tool that's available in iMap is just the basic ability to organize and be efficient with your management and having that ability to track information just by going online. Essentially, iMapInvasives can be looked at as a way to transform your data management system into something that is very easy to use. So it's kind of a nice little visual to help you understand. So iMapInvasives is an online platform that can turn your data management system from something that's a big pile of papers and a big mess on your desk, something that is really easy to use and access information that is maybe a lot of information and you want to just find a specific piece of it. This is a way that you can do that. It's really efficient in that we have something called projects in iMap, and these are serving as a method for you to combine data together so that you can easily find it later on. And so essentially it's serving as a custom filter for you to group certain data together and then query for it at a later date. I have a few examples of existing projects that we already have in iMap, and this would include the Allegheny Land Trust Stewardship Project, the Pennsylvania Pymatuning State Park treatment efforts, and also Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy has various pieces of property that they do management on, and a particular one is in Frick Park, specifically Frick Woods. So they're tracking information in each of the projects that they can then go back and query for and find apart from all the other data that's being tracked in iMap. Okay, and just mention, so if, for anyone who isn't familiar with the projects already, if you want to become a member of a project, you have to talk to me and I will set that up for you, or if you want to create a project, again, talk to me about that. But in order to actually query for data in a certain project, you have to actually be a member of it. Okay, so it's really important to be in touch with me if you want to either be a member or set up a new project. Okay, so efficiency. Again, this is something that is really important as far as data management goes. And our mobile app is a really good example of how you can be really efficient and very quick in gathering data and logging it, and you're done, essentially. So our mobile app does that, where you can record just observations only on the mobile app. But this is a really great resource if you're someone who's on the go, you're outside, you don't really want to have to jot down notes on a piece of paper and come back later and enter it. The mobile app is going to be a great tool to use in that regard. Online accessibility is really, really nice because since if you are someone that has a lot of different partners, online accessibility opens up the data sharing to anybody who has an internet connection, essentially. So, you know, the database isn't housed in a particular organization. It's not, you know, only accessible to certain individuals, but it's open to anyone who has a registered user account and who has access to the internet. So it makes it really easy to get to. And online accessibility feeds into how the data is viewable, and you can look at data in various formats in iMap, which can be really handy depending on your purposes. But you can look at data spatially on the map. You can look at data in a list form in our tables, and you can also look at data in a report, which we talked about that a little bit before, and can be really handy in understanding different types of data in that regard. You can also download data. That is an available option. You can get it in forms of an Excel spreadsheet, or if you're a GIS user, you can get it in a geodatabase. But just keep in mind that the download capabilities in iMap are going to be restricted based on your user level. Okay. So, you will be able to download data that you entered or you are the observer for if you're a lower level user. And you'll be able to download data for other things if you're a higher level user. But also one other thing to mention is that it's impossible for any registered user to download all data that's available in iMap. In order to do that, you have to submit a request to me, the administrator, and ask for that information. And the reason we do that we don't allow data to be downloaded by just anybody and all of it, is certain data we are not actually allowed to redistribute based on the wishes of the data provider. I also like to keep tabs on who the data is going out to then better understand the purposes that they're using it for, and to then help to use that information to build our network and to understand the data and the people that are using it. So it's done on purpose. It's meant to hinder or make things more complicated for you. And it's very easy if you ever do want to get more data than what you're actually able to. Give me an email or give me a phone call. I'm always happy to help out in that regard. So, we've talked a little about understanding species distributions, but now I want to show you more about how that is done. Better understanding where some things are being found and to what extent they're being found. So you can use iMap to query statewide for any species that you might be interested in, and also search for in a specific part of the state what species have already been reported there. So we'll use an example of water chestnut. You'd like to know, where has water chestnut already been found out in Pennsylvania? So to answer that question, you can open up iMap and use the map to perform a statewide distribution search using information already reported via the observation record type. So you can get those results at the county and the watershed level, and that the watershed level is actually really important because since this is an aquatic species, it's impacting the various water bodies where it's being found at. Looking at the data in that watershed perspective is actually really helpful and very, very important. But you can look at information as far as where something is specifically being found at by looking at a point or a dot on the map, and so that also is available. Also, when you're looking at data on the map, you can add reference layers to better understand the information you're looking at, and I will show you some examples of that. Also, you can get up close to the infested area by using our zoom tool, and then you can click on that record and actually open it up right from the map and look at the details in that individual record. Into looking at observation data on the map, you can also look for information that might be documented if water chestnut had been assessed in an assessment record, if it had been sprayed for, or if it's been treated anywhere. So don't forget, those other management records are also going to be potentially important depending on your purposes of what you'd like to know. So in order to get at that information, we have options to run custom queries for each of these data types for chestnut in relation to some of those management efforts where water chestnut was involved. So these are all ways that you can better understand species distributions, ways that you can query the data. But I want to show you a few examples on the map of what it actually looks like. Here we can see, this is a picture of the county level distribution data for water chestnut that we currently have in iMap. And the way I got this is I open up the map, and over the left-hand side, you'll see a section called Distribution. And select water chestnut as your species, and there's a little button down there, you'll see it highlighted, it's called County. This is the map that will come up. So you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 counties right now in Pennsylvania that has water chestnut. And this is really pretty accurate because water chestnut is what we would consider high priority invasive species in Pennsylvania because it is rare and it is one that definitely is a threat to other aquatic invasives that are other aquatic species that the water chestnut might be competing against. Okay, it's a quick way to get a good understanding of the counties that are being impacted by water chestnut. Again, about the watershed-level distribution information, and this is important because water chestnut is an aquatic plant. And this is showing you, I believe this is a HUC 6 or a HUC 8 biologic unit code is what HUC stands for. But these are the watersheds that are being impacted by the water chestnut reports that we have received so far. So if you're a watershed specialist or if you're someone who know this type of information, we also have that available. Again, data was gotten by being in the map in the distribution section there on the left-hand side, but then clicking on the watershed button. So this map is pretty similar, but now we also have the dots. We have the points on the map now indicating where water chestnut has been found specifically. Okay, so nice because we have that distribution in the background. We have those highlighted counties, and now you can see the points on the map. And I mentioned a little bit earlier, but I do want to point out that because New York is our neighbor, we can now see points on the map for where water chestnut has been found in New York, which is helpful. And if we look at Warren County up in the top near Erie County, we can see that probably some of the spread of water chestnut maybe came from New York because we can see that there is also findings of water chestnut there as well. Okay, so that might be helpful to better understand the source of where the water chestnut is coming from. But again, that's just my theory. That would have to be proven in the field to know for sure. A similar map, but now we're looking at the points of water chestnut with the watershed data in the background. Okay, again, just having that as a reference. Now, for those of you who might not be familiar with what the symbology looks like and what it means, in iMap here is a slide for you that really goes into more detail on that. So there's green circles on the map, there's orange squares, and there's yellow circles. And so, the green circles are representing observation data that has been confirmed, which is meaning that the administrator has said, yes, this is good data, this has been confirmed and looked at, and representing a precise location. So maybe that particular finding had GPS coordinates associated with it, or it was hand mapped based on saying, yes, this is the exact spot where this species was found. The approximate information, those orange squares, is also data that's been confirmed or approved by the administrator because it's been looked over and said, yes, the species identity is correct. The only difference is that the approximate information is saying it doesn't have a precise location. For example, the orange square you see there, I think several are in New York, it could be found somewhere within that county. It could have been found somewhere within a particular water body or a municipality, but essentially it's saying this finding doesn't have a precise spot-on location. But it doesn't have that precise location. It's also, still really important to document because, for example, if it's a high-priority invasive species and we want to know where this, species is being found at, even an approximate record is going to be really helpful. Okay. And so the last piece of symbol that you'll see on there is that yellow circle. And this is information, this is an observation that was just submitted or has been submitted and is waiting on the administrator, so myself or colleagues, to take a look at, make sure that the species identity is correct based on photographs that were provided to ensure that it was mapped correctly. Like before we will confirm a record, we want to make sure that, for example, if it's an aquatic species that is not mapped on land, vice versa, to ensure that the data that we are confirming is in fact correct, both as far as the species identity and location where it was found. Back to the view of the map, I talked about zooming and how that's a really important part of using the map to better understand infestations. So here you can see we have counties where water chestnut has been found. We see the points on the map. But looking at it from the statewide level is not very helpful. So say I'm more interested in what's going on in the southeast corner of Pennsylvania. I can zoom into that section and I can see much more specifically these confirmed spot-on observations, where they've been found, and I can click on any one of those dots. I can bring up a record of each of those findings and learn a little bit more about it. So for example, I actually used a tool that we have. It's called our lasso tool, and it's circled up there on the top. It's like a little polygon, it looks like. And that essentially allows you to draw a polygon around the observations that you want to learn more about and bring up this particular pop-up window. And then see a list of each one of those observation records, the ID number. You can see the species and the organization that was responsible for finding and submitting that data, the county where it was found in, the date it was found on, and its status as far as if it's been confirmed or unconfirmed. Okay, so that's kind of just a quick way of using the map to better understand species distributions, both at a statewide level and also more at a local scale. Okay, so we talked a little bit about email alerts already, but now I want to go into more detail about how you set them up and the different alerts that we have available. So these are going to be used to keep you informed of new or high priority invasive species that are being found. Okay, so you log into iMap and you scroll down a little bit on that main navigation page, you'll see a section here, I have it circled, called Manage My Alerts. And this is the section where you can go and create new alerts, or you can edit or deactivate alerts as well. Before I go into the details of how you actually go in and set them up, the benefits of email alerts are the following. So you can stay informed of recent findings. So again, we have a lot of different users that are submitting data to IMAP, and how you stay aware of all of those findings that are important to you. Well, this is how you do it. You set up an email alert. You can set information that you're receiving for email alerts to help prioritize your survey and your treatment efforts, again, based on that information that you're going to set up in a custom alert, and to take action to prevent the spread of those species that are recently discovered new in Pennsylvania, that they've been found for the first time. So putting that information that you're receiving and putting it into action. 3 alert types are available, and I'm going to talk about each of them, and I would say, don't feel like you have to set up an alert for each type unless it's appropriate for you. So use the ones that will suit your particular needs. This alert is called a continual alert, and this is going to put a focus on an individual or a group of invasive species that you have an interest in staying aware of. So what you do is select your area of interest. So you've chosen a particular species, and now you say, I'm concerned about this particular area that I want to stay aware of. So you select either a county, you could select a cooperative weed management area, a CWMA. Someone who's like a watershed specialist, you might want to select a water body, or maybe you're just interested in any of these species that are being found anywhere in the state. So you would choose all of Pennsylvania. Just so you know, is probably one of the most basic types of alerts out of the 3 that we offer that most people use, and it's helpful in just staying aware of the particular invasive species that are most important and most relevant to you. So here's an example of a continual alert that you could set up. You could say, alert me anytime a red-eared slider is found in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Okay, anytime we would receive an observation, and that would be confirmed for that particular species in that county, you would receive an alert telling you that that observation was reported to the database. So here's some examples of a continual alert to give you kind of a better idea of how to use it. So you could alert that says, alert me anytime water chestnut is reported in Lake Towhee, which is a particular lake in southeastern Pennsylvania that's actually been treated several years in a row now, specifically for water chestnuts. So that might be something that you just want to keep tabs on, make sure you know if more water chestnut is being found there. You could say, alert me anytime bog bulrush is reported in Lancaster County. So maybe you're concerned about something at the county level. So this alert would do that for you. And this is more at the statewide level. You could say, alert me anytime a round goby is reported anywhere in Pennsylvania. So these are types of continual alerts that you could set up, again, based on your own individual interests and the species or the locations that you are primarily concerned about. So you can tailor it to whatever you would want. This type of alert is called an early detection alert. It's going to put a focus on species that are rare or that are not yet found in Pennsylvania. The continual alert, you're going to choose your area of interest, a county, cooperative weed management area, a water body, or all of Pennsylvania. There are some other geography options available, but these are some of the more common ones, which is why I'm mentioning them here. And just so you're aware, iMaplnvasives, the program considers a species to be an early detection species. There are 3 or fewer observations for that species in a specified geography. So what I mean by that, here's an example. So say there's only one report so far, one observation, flowering rush, which is land invasive species. It's been reported specifically in Allegheny County. So that makes this species an early detection species as far as IMAP will consider that species. So because less than 3, we only have the 1 report in a particular geography. So Allegheny County is our example there. Okay. For your reference, this type of alert will help to raise a red flag when new or rare species are being detected. And it ultimately is going to help to inform early detection and rapid response efforts. So for species that are new or emerging, and if you have an alert set up for that species and you then get a report that it's been found, hopefully you can speed into action or tell someone who has the ability to go out and conduct treatment that this is something that we want to act on as quickly as possible. So I'll get into that example. I talked about the wavy leaf basket grass and use that as my example here. Another way of explaining the early detection alert. So you could set up an alert that says, alert me if wavy leaf basket grass is found anywhere in Pennsylvania. And because this is an emerging invader in Pennsylvania, rare and high priority, so we want to keep tabs on where that one is being found. So here are examples of an early detection alert that you could potentially set up. This picture of diffuse snapweed, and this one is not yet found in Pennsylvania as far as we know. You would set up an early detection alert for this species. The first report that someone would submit and would be confirmed in iMap would trigger that early detection alert, that you then be aware that it was found. This is another one that hasn't yet been found in Pennsylvania. Again, if you set up a custom alert for this specific species, the first observation that was reported would trigger that early detection alert. And pond water starwort, this is a species that we do have in Pennsylvania right now, but it's still fairly rare. We don't have, it's not widespread, it's not in a ton of different places. And sectional reports, based on a geography that you would select, would trigger that early detection alert. Okay, and the last type of alert that we have available is called the new to geography alert. So this alert will put a focus on a group of similar species that are found in an area that they are not known to have been found in before. Okay, so this is going to be another thing where you're going to choose your area of interest, so county, CWMA, a water body, or all of the states. And so just for your reference, this is an alert that will differ, or it's different from the early detection alert because it will put a focus on both rare and common invasive species. And it only allow you to select a grouping of species, not an individual species. So this is really most useful if you already know the invasive species in general that are present in a certain location, and you want to know when a new species is found there for the first time. This is especially useful for land managers and other natural resource professionals who are fairly familiar with a piece of land. They go out there a lot, and then they want to know when something is found there that's new for the first time, whether that's a high priority rare species or common, something like Japanese knotweed. So an example of that would be, alert me when any new terrestrial plant species is reported in Bear Run Nature Reserve, which is in Fayette County. Examples of the new to geography alert would be some of these. You would say, alert me when any new plant species is reported in Warren County. You could also say, alert me when any new aquatic plant is reported in the Pymatoonie Reservoir. Maybe you're a watershed specialist and you want to keep tabs on what's being found there. You could also say, alert me when any new terrestrial plant species is reported in Bucktail State Park. So maybe this is an area that you help to manage or that you visit often and you want to keep tabs on what's being found there that's new. Different alerts, examples of the new to geography alert that you could potentially set up. Okay, the last tool I want to talk about, and this is get into some of the specific examples of how iMap can be used, is conducting scientific and academic research. Something that happens actually pretty often, which is really cool to see that the data is being used for that. The things that are happening, or that you could do if you're interested, is you could use the data to study species distributions over time. You conduct that invasive species modeling, which is where you predict where certain species will be found in other parts of Pennsylvania. You also use information to determine threats to native biodiversity in specific areas based on the reported invasive species according to the data we've already received. So here's an example of species distribution over time, specifically for hydrilla. This map was actually made very recently by one of our staff members here with the Pennsylvania Natural Heritage Program. And it shows, according to data that we have in iMap so far, over time where hydrilla has been found, and it has continued to unfortunately spread across the state. So we're showing that information using GIS, our mapping service, to highlight the particular counties that are being impacted, as well as the general specific locations that are being marked by the blue stars that you see there. This is a map that's talking about starting in 1989 when the very first hydrilla observation was made, to 2017, where you see there in the lower right corner that we have a total of 24 counties that are impacted by hydrilla right now, and how that has just over time really spread. And so this is actually a species in Pennsylvania that is very important. It's one that can really impact our native biodiversity. Also is a hindrance to recreational activities, which then plays into the economic part of things, where you need to spend a lot of money to treat it in order to bring back that recreational part of things. And so it's just one that we want to make sure that we have a good handle on. And so essentially, the data that was used to create these maps came from iMapInvasives, which came from you guys, our users. And so this is kind of a neat way to see that data in action. Another thing that happened sort of recently in 2016 was research done specifically for a species called didymo. And you'll see some pictures of it here on the next slide. But Matt Shank, who is with the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, set up a study to compile a distribution map of where didymo has been found in Pennsylvania. And so he used sources to come up with that information. And one of those sources did include iMapInvasives. And so here you can see on the left-hand side, there's a point map of all the different locations where didymo has been found. And on the right, you can see a map that was created that outlines suitable habitat for where didymo could potentially survive. So using those two maps to basically understand where didymo has already been found and understanding the places that are suitable for where it can live helps to indicate maybe other places that they want to go out and prize for future survey efforts. And this is where they say the suitable habitat isn't here. We don't need to survey that because we now know that it can't live there. This was part of the research that was done. And here you can see some photos of didymo. It lives on the substrate, the bottom of a water body, and it essentially just, it forms a big mat, and it doesn't allow other things to grow, and it interferes with some of the natural processes that go on in water bodies. I mentioned a quick quote I mentioned, I thought that was kind of neat to hear from him. He said, "After all didymo distribution records were compiled, iMapInvasives serves as an ideal repository because it allows other researchers, resource managers, and citizen scientists to access the information easily." And so coming from one of our users, someone who headed up a really important study like this. And so hopefully that goes to show that this is a really cool and a very helpful database that is being used not only in this research, but is helpful as a repository to have that information available for others. I do want to share some information from our counterparts in the north, in New York. They developed some map models recently that are used to help natural resource managers prioritize where to focus their resources for protection and invasive species control. And the resulting map model is going to be, and I'll show you here in the next few slides, it's comprised of 4 reference layers, and ultimately will spotlight the high-value natural areas that are susceptible to new invasions and potential dispersal. Again, this is from the New York iMapInvasives program. We do not have this capability or this functionality in Pennsylvania right now. That is potentially something we could look into getting for Pennsylvania, but right now this is just from New York. You can see here in the screenshot a lot of green in New York, and this is a reference layer called their Ecological Significance Map Layer. Essentially shows the locations of rare species and significant biological communities. Also, we'll use stream quality and information from native mussel richness surveys. Then looking at that map, the dark green areas will represent the areas of high ecological significance. So this is 4 of the map layers. The second map layer is the protected or their natural areas layer. And it shows lands that are being identified by the New York protected areas and national land cover databases. And the dark blue in the map here is going to show protected places with high conservation value. Okay, second map layer. The third map layer is their risk of spread. And it's going to show potential invasion pathways that are based on methods of human transportation. And the red areas will essentially represent those high human impacts. So there are 3 different layers: the ecological significance, the protect or the natural areas, and risk of spread. The fourth layer is the comprehensive score layer. So it's essentially taking all 3 of those layers and combining them together into a comprehensive map layer. And so the comprehensive map layer is going to show areas from low to high prioritization in regard to where management efforts should be directed. And those are going to be highlighted in red. There's hot spots. And that indicate areas of high conservation value and high risk of spread. So this map is really, really awesome and really, really useful for people who do management of land on protected properties or preserves, or even citizen scientists who are going out and saying, I want to be a part of trying to make sure that we protect some of these ecologically significant areas. This is a map layer that is going to literally point you in the direction of where those places are that need to be focused on. So again, this is a really cool thing that has done, and maybe hopefully Pennsylvania will be able to do something very similar. Okay, so going just a little bit more into detail, and here you can see a screenshot and an example of how you can use this information to prioritize those areas to be on the lookout for new invasions. This is going to be an example of water chestnut here. You can see the locations on the map with that comprehensive score reference layer, use background, and it's basically, again, pointing out those areas of high conservation as designated by the dark red sections. And that can be used to help to prioritize future survey and efforts in New York. So this kind of cool thing. And people that are with local organizations, a park or even a preserve, can be more strategic with their management efforts using this type of information to help guide them. Before we go into some of our guest speakers, I do have just a few more slides here I want to show talking about specifically threats to native biodiversity and how you can use iMap to help determine those threats. So, for example, if you're a land manager, determining threats to native species is, of course, a very important thing because that's what you're trying to protect. So how to go about doing that? How to go about trying to figure out the specific threats that are important for you that you need to keep in mind. Already familiar with the native species that are found on a plot of land, you then use iMapInvasives to run a series of queries or even set up an email alert like that new to geography email alert that we talked about. You can learn which high priority invasive species are also being found that are present there. So, an example of how you might go about doing that. So I want to choose an area that you're interested in. So in my example, I'm choosing Lake Arthur, which is in Butler County. Secondly, then you want to, on the map, turn on the confirm and approximate data layers. And then if you have that lasso tool that we talked about a little bit ago, you can use the lasso tool to learn about which species are present in this particular area. So literally in Lake Pleasant, or I'm sorry, in Lake Arthur, or also in the surrounding area. And you can also, of course, see here the specific locations where those species are being found. That will come up in a pop-up menu, and you can click on any one of those records to learn more about it, but your basic information is already provided. You can see the species name, you can see the organization of who found that finding, that particular species, that they found it on. So you can see if it's new data or if it might be historical data. Another example of using the lasso tool and the map to figure out specific invasive threats. So here I want to know which invasive species are being found either in or around Lake Pleasant, which is in Erie County. And here I drew that polygon using the lasso tool around all of the observations that were found there. And in the list that then would come up, I can see that some of the more high priority species in this area that I might want to focus efforts on are Phragmites, Japanese barberry, and narrow-leaf cattail. Okay, this is an example to show you how you can get a better understanding of the threats to a certain area just by using the map and the species that will come up that way. Okay, so this next part of the presentation, we're going to be introducing some of our guest speakers. I'm going to talk about some examples of how they are using iMapInvasives specifically in their work that they are doing. And so our first presenter is Nancy Olmstead. Nancy is from Maine, and she is with the Maine Agriculture, Conservation, Forestry, and she also is the administrator of the Maine iMapInvasives program. So Nancy, I will let you take it away.
Thanks, Amy. As Amy said, my name is Nancy Olmstead, and I work in Maine for the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. Work in Maine is supported by a variety of organizations. I'm 100% grant funded, so I need to thank the Maine NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, the Maine Outdoor Heritage Fund, Maine Department of Transportation, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. A little about me, I'm an invasive plant biologist, so that's what I spend all my time thinking about. I'm, as Amy said, the iMapInvasives coordinator for Maine, and I like to say that I'm an educator and scientific storyteller trying to help people get their heads around invasive plants and be creative when they think about how to manage them. It's something which can feel overwhelming, so it's helpful to kind of wade in there and brainstorm and be creative. Several examples of how iMapInvasives is being used in Maine. And the first example is from Colby College, which is a small liberal arts college in Waterville, Maine. I think they have about 2,000 students and have about 500 acres of forest. And in that forest, they're trying to get their heads around an invasive plant situation. So here is a screenshot from Maine iMapInvasives showing in blue areas that have been surveyed for invasive plant presence, and then you're seeing some of those green observation points that Amy talked about earlier, along with some small areas of yellow, which are showing up as sort of a light green color underneath the blue survey areas. And then the yellow areas represent denser areas of infestation. So I went out with a handful of good botany students, and they were able to identify what plants were present on their 500 acres of forest, so that they now share this information with a licensed herbicide applicator who's going to come and do some cut stem treatments of invasive plants on the property. And it was helpful for them to kind of get their heads around what they had and where it was and about how much, so that they could share that information with their contractor. they can use iMapInvasives to follow up and record treatment information and show progress over time so that the facilities and maintenance folks who are funding this effort can see the value of what they're doing. Next example. The next one is from an aquatic invasive plant program. That's the Macelko, our nonprofit volunteer-led organization. They also have a few staff. And they're on variable leaf milfoil mapping in Macelko Lake, which is also connected with a river, which is bounded, and so it kind of acts like a lake also. In this shot, you're seeing the blue areas of water, a branch in sort of the left of the aerial image, and areas of survey in blue, surveys for the variable leaf milfoil. So if a volunteer goes out, they can record the area that they surveyed, and anyone else can also see that area in iMapInvasives, and so that's to avoid duplication in survey effort. The point there inside the survey are where the plant was actually detected, and then those yellow areas represent larger areas of infestation that were mapped. So they can show, different effort over time. Each of these records are associated with a date, and so you can query to see progress over time, that kind of thing. Sort of an aquatic plant example from Maine. Next slide. In my kind of bailiwick in the state of Maine, Bureau of Parks and Lands, this is sort of one of my sister bureaus within my department, we own and manage about 600,000 acres of public land in the state of Maine, and so it's quite a thing for us to keep track of our invasive plant management. So what you're seeing on this screen is a report from a particular project, I believe it is, showing what invasive plant species are present in a certain area. So, for example, a particular state of Maine parcel like a state park, I develop a project, and so observations and assessments for the project are tagged with that project's name, and I can run a query. And so, for example, there are 14 species found at this state of Maine land holding, and I know the print is probably too small for you to read, but the little graph there gives a breakdown of how many observations of the different plants were recorded, and so you get a sense very quickly of what are the largest potential problems. Keep in mind that there are also the shapes or assessments that are drawn, and so that's another thing to look at. This is great for the state of Maine because all of our managers can get in there and access the information. Since it's stored online, in the online database, we don't have to worry about things being data that's stored locally on someone's drive or on a server. You can run into issues if you're trying to access the same ArcGIS system at the same time. Slide. This is just another way to visualize information. So again, with our State of Maine Bureau of Parks and Lands invasive plant management, here's a query for treatments at a given site or project. And so in this view, we're seeing that there were 13 treatments at this particular area. I think that this was the result of using a lasso tool, or perhaps this was a query by project. That's what that was. This is a query by project to see the treatments associated with one site. So in this table, I can easily see when treatments began, who has been doing the treatment, et cetera. And if I want more details, I can just click into the individual records to learn more. So the ability to query the data and get results quickly is a great function of iMapInvasives. Next. This is a fun example from a nonprofit here in Maine called the Maine Island Trail Association, and they are an interesting organization. They don't actually own any land or any conservation easements, but they have handshake agreements with landowners to maintain campsites and day use areas all along the Maine coast for paddlers and other kinds of boaters. And so they are working in partnership with landowners to help to maintain those sites, and part of that maintenance and stewardship involves dealing with invasive plants, which can encroach into these areas. So they are doing surveys for invasive plants on these offshore islands. And as you can see along this photograph of the Maine coast from about Casco Bay in the bottom left to about Jonesport in the top right, they have a lot of survey sites. So their staff can record their surveys and easily visualize, what sites have been visited and assessed for invasive plants. They also have a variety of seasonal staff, and so again, it's just a great convenient resource for everyone to be able to get in and record data. This is a fun visualization for me of just the power of a statewide tool, how much use can be recorded. I think that the surveys that you're seeing here were recorded over a time frame of only about 2 seasons, so they were very hard at work. Next. And last but not least, the State of Maine Department of Transportation, which is responsible for maintaining a lot of the interstate within the state of Maine, they also have invasive plants that they are dealing with. And I've been helping them the past couple of years with a research project, and so I've been going out to map invasive plants at specific sites. In this image from iMapInvasives, you're seeing the results of a mapping survey, mostly Maine observation points for more isolated invasive plants, but then you're also seeing some yellow areas of denser invasive plant populations that are more continuous along the side of the road. So transportation owns the right to manage the right-of-way along the interstate, which can be quite wide and can be adjacent to areas of natural significance. So for example, here seeing that the interstate crosses a river, and that's associated with a significant wetland complex on the south side and even to a lesser extent on the north side of the road. And so we're working together to try to strategize how to address invasive plants in these landscapes where the roads intersect with features of natural significance. And part of the first step is just understand, what is the situation, what invasive plants are present, and how much, so we can get our hand around it and go from there. Those are the end of my examples, and I'll be happy to take any questions about this. And earlier that I learned once that it takes 8 seconds for introverts to ask a question. A particularly long, quiet time. Anybody have any questions for me about iMap?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Yeah, does anyone have any questions? Please feel free to speak up. We're always happy to hear if you have any thoughts. 8 seconds, Nancy. So you can always, if there's any questions at the end, you can always ask me some questions then. And if they after the training, you can always feel free to get in touch with me, and I can send your questions on to Nancy if you won't get an opportunity to say them during the training. So thank you, Nancy, for that. I appreciate it. We do have another guest speaker today, Nicholas Macelko. Nick, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, Nicholas Macelko. I'm a grad student at the Pennsylvania State University. I'm studying environmental systems engineering, and today I'd like to talk about the iMapInvasives mobile app. Next slide. So iMapInvasives mobile. The app is very useful because it allows you to take pictures on the site with click of your phone, as you can see on the screenshot in the bottom right-hand corner here. You just on the take photo, take a picture of the plant or organism you're looking at. In this case, we're looking at New Zealand mud snail, which was taken on top of a white bottle cap. That white background makes the flat shell of the snail really stand out. What's also very useful is it includes the common names and scientific names that you can even change to have it as Vic only or common names only, or broaden. What makes this useful is if you're someone like me who can only remember the common or scientific name at one time and never both at the same time. And incredibly helpful to be able to change that. It also, the GPS that is installed on your phone also allows you to take the location and not have to go through convoluted methods to find out the exact coordinates that you're standing at, which makes life a lot more easier as opposed to going online and putting in the lat and longitude longitude manually. It's so incredibly useful because you don't need internet access right away. As you fill information, it's saved on your phone until you move to an area with internet access and can upload the information later. I found it incredibly useful, especially when a park or area that is usually have that sort of access. And of course, later you can also always edit the data that you enter in with the various tools provided through iMapInvasives. Next, please. Two of the organisms I was tracking, one is water chestnut. This lovely little field here is actually Bradford Reservoir. The surface of the reservoir is completely covered in trapenotins, known as water chestnut. Next, please. Water chestnut is very distinctive and easy to identify with its leaf margins and puffy air bladders, which you can see in the upper left-hand corner of the picture, poking out below some of the leaves. Next. So what's really distinctive and a bit irritating are its seed pods, which these two images are from the shoreline of Bradford Reservoir, where it is completely covered in these spiky pods. One that each individual plant can produce up to 20 of these pods, have an area stated as infested as Bradford Reservoir. This is the end result here, which is irritating if you are a fisherman, boater, or just want to enjoy the shoreline. Next. I've been collecting is the New Zealand mud snail here in Century County. It is found in Spring Creek and its tributaries. The mud snail, as you can see here, is roughly the size of Lincoln's beard on a penny. Slide, please. And a close-up image of the mud snail taken from inside of a water bottle. Again, how useful using your phone can be when it comes to photographing even something as small as the New Zealand mud snail. By the New Zealand mud snail, they typically have between 5 to 7 holes and a closable operculum, which is kind of like a trapdoor on the bottom of the shell that they can retract into. On the right-hand side, as opposed to snails, which would be the left-hand side. And for most other snail species, they don't have identical shape as New Zealand mud snail does on the left-hand side. We do at least one species, I believe it belongs to the genus Spontalis, which is, again, Tree County here and can be confused with it, but its coloring is much different. The snail ranges from like a brownish to black color, depending on whether it's in water or in the image you're looking at on a dry piece of paper, where the other species is sort of a yellowish and has almost like a polka dot pattern to it. Is a lovely infestation of the mud snail in Spring Creek. Anyway, that's it. That's the presentation. Are there any questions in regards to using the mobile app, or any interest in water chestnut in Bucks County or New England mud snail in Century County?
Yeah, this is Nancy from Maine. Can you tell us a little about the New Zealand mud snail? Does it eat plants, or does it compete with other snails for other resources?
The New Zealand mud snail does compete with all of the native macroinvertebrates that you would find in Spring Creek. They're essentially machines that just move across the surface of the undersides of rocks and branches, completely consuming all of. They can be natural organic matter that would be consumed by other caddisflies, mayflies, or other herbaceous macroinvertebrates. When they infest areas such as Millbrook Marsh and Spring Creek, they can completely coat the bottom of the rocks, preventing the organisms from finding these niches to begin with, and assuming all of the organic matter that would normally be found there.
Is there any other questions for Nick? I'll give everyone 8 seconds. Okay. Again, if anyone has any questions later on, there will be some time at the very end of the training to ask additional questions. But thank you, Nick. Really appreciate that. Okay. So there's a few more things I wanted to talk about before we wrap up today's training. Hopefully, the stories and examples that Nancy and Nick were that they provided will help to give you a better understanding of how users and other administrators and folks in different states are using the program to help to advance the work that they're doing and to just better understand species distributions of certain invaders. So this part is just going to talk about testimonials and provide some encouraging words from some other people who are excited about using iMapInvasives. This is Brian, the watershed specialist for the Crawford County Conservation District, which is up in the northwestern part of the state near Erie. And Brian had this to say about iMap. So he says that one of the greatest values of using iMapInvasives is doing a quick catch of a new invasive species report. Because he is a watershed specialist, throughout his daily duties, one of the things that he is often doing is tracking where invasive species are being found in his county. And he also had this to say, iMapInvasives is a great quick reference of where species have been found, as well as where they are getting close to the county or watershed borders that I am responsible for. Brian can also use iMapInvasives to query for species that he is interested in on a wide basis as well. He's saying this allows me to become better aware of new or incoming threats. iMapInvasives, we've talked about how you can use it to record various management efforts. And he's interested in staying aware of treatment efforts that are happening in Crawford County. And he said iMapInvasives is used by partners to track treated areas as well as document large-scale survey results of the infested areas. So again, coming from our natural resource professionals, our state, who is seeing a lot of use and a lot of value in using the iMapInvasives program. So I wanted to share that with you guys. Another testimonial is from this guy. His name is Benjamin Mummer. He is the Director of Land Stewardship at the Central Pennsylvania Conservancy. And this is a quote directly from Ben. When invasive species find their way into Pennsylvania, iMapInvasives reveals their geographic distributions by distributing information across political and institutional boundaries and among citizens and scientists via email alerts. To innovatively collecting and publicly publishing this important occurrence data, iMapInvasives serves as a network that connects citizens and professionals in efforts that collaboratively address the threats invasive species pose. So there's some encouraging words from Ben. I have another testimonial I wanted to share with you all. This is from Nicholas Tonelli. He is one of our many citizen scientists who, like Nick Macelko, is also out and enjoys being in nature and is excited to help document where invasive species are being found. So this is what Nicholas Tonelli has to say. He says, as a nature enthusiast, I'm greatly alarmed by the spread and impact of invasive species. The iMapInvasives program is an outstanding resource that I've used not only to share my observations, but to further understanding of invasive species. The program is a wealth of information all in one place that I can't find elsewhere. For Nicholas Tonelli specifically, as I mentioned, he is a citizen scientist. He's not necessarily associated with any particular organization, but he just is enjoying being in nature. He has provided a lot of observation data to us that's important specifically for hemlock woolly adelgid, which you can see in the photo on the right-hand side that was taken by him and was submitted to iMapInvasives as part of one of his observation records. This is we have data from Nick for 10 different records that is from 8 different counties, all for that hemlock woolly adelgid. Again, this is really great data to get from a citizen scientist because it will help us to better understand where this species is being found. There is a few states in Pennsylvania where hemlock woolly adelgid has not been found in. Unfortunately, this is a fairly widespread species, but may very well be one of the people that helped to potentially find it in a county where it's never been found before. And so again, the importance of gathering data from different sources, not only from state agencies and nonprofit groups, but also from someone like Nicholas, is really helpful to help in building our maps and better understanding where these species are being found at. Just some quick testimonials I wanted to share. That they not be on the training with us today, but I wanted to make sure that their thoughts were shared with everybody. So we have about 15 minutes left in the training. I wanted to talk a little bit about some other particular case studies where you all can learn about how iMapInvasives is being applied to different types of management and research tests involving invasive species. So the first mention is a web feature service. This is something that we have set up for the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission right now. This is something that we can set up for any group or organization that is interested in having that. And so now the Fish and Boat Commission is one of the groups that has this set up. I'm not familiar with the web feature service. I want to explain a little bit more what this is and what it means. Providing this feature service to Fish and Boat for specifically aquatic invasive species location data, again, based on reports that we have being submitted to iMapInvasives from all over Pennsylvania. And Fish is going to use this data to better understand potential threats that are being posed to rare native species by integrating the iMapInvasives data into their ArcGIS mapping service. So by doing this way, it will enable Fish and Boat to act on these threats that are being posed to these rare native species by using the data that's being submitted. So what happens in this feature service is you take the database, the data from iMapInvasives specifically for the aquatic data, and you incorporate that into a GIS so that you essentially can create a new reference layer just of that data. So what Fish and Boat can do is they already have a bunch of different reference layers in their GIS, and one of those is probably for rare species. And what they can do is essentially overlay the invasive species data with the rare species data and identify, looking at proximity and how close an invasive species might be to a rare species, and looking at the date that the invasive species and the rare species was found, and basically doing some analysis to say, this is a threat. This rare species is being threatened by this invasive. This rare species is being threatened by this invasive species. It's something that we need to pay attention to. Something that's neat about the web feature service too is even though it's kind of its own separate thing, it's tied to iMap so that it's a dynamic data viewing service. So essentially, as soon as a record is put in iMapInvasives in our platform, it will show up in the web feature service Fish and Boat can see. So it's dynamic in that regard. It doesn't take like a day or a week for that data to show up. It happens right away. Pretty cool. Here's a view of what the feature service looks like. So if you are a user of GIS, this should look a little bit familiar to you. So essentially, the data that's being shown on here is those green circles and those orange squares that we talked about already. It's the confirmed precise location data, and it's the confirmed non-precise or approximate location data. And again, both can use that information, overlay it with their own data, and do analysis from there. So I wanted to include this slide here too because I think it helps to illustrate the whole point of the web feature service, and it shows how it works. Okay. So if you look down there at the bottom, you can see the data gets collected in IMAP by a variety of sources. It gets transformed into that feature service, which is then made available to Fish and Boat. The staff can then overlay that iMapInvasives data with their data, and then they can take action based on having that knowledge of where the species and the invasive species are at in comparison to one another. Something that we do have available, and it is something that we can customize based on different groups and your interest in having something like this. So if you are interested in having a web feature service set up for you, please let me know. You can touch with me via email or phone, and we can go from there if this is something that you think would be helpful to you. Another about is the Eurasian water milfoil that is in the area around where Lake Pleasant is, which is located in Erie County. And the land around Lake Pleasant is owned by the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, which is my organization that I work for. And invasives is being used to document the management efforts that are occurring at Lake Pleasant to try to manage the milfoil there. But to give you a background on Lake Pleasant and why this is such a special area, Lake Pleasant is one of only 8 natural glacially formed lakes in the northwest region of Pennsylvania. And research in the 1980s unveiled that rare native plant communities were found within and around each of these lakes. And unfortunately, many of these lakes have been invaded by exotic species, both plant and animals, which ultimately will pose a threat to each of the lake's ecological integrity. However, Lake Pleasant so far has been able to avoid many of these invasive species threats. And today it still retains a healthy and intact ecological community, if you want to keep it that way. And so because of that, because it has still retained that good ecological soundness, it is considered the jewel of the the northwest Pennsylvania glacial lakes. As mentioned before, the conservation area surrounding much of Lake Pleasant is owned and maintained by the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. And so because of that, we have taken action for several years now to try and manage Eurasian water milfoil that is found in gravel ponds around Lake Pleasant, not necessarily in the lake itself, but in these surrounding ponds. This milfoil, if you are not familiar with what it is or what it does, it's known to form really thick mats that will displace native species, and it will interfere with recreational activities. So the goal of the Conservancy, as far as Lake Pleasant goes, is to retain the important native species and the natural communities that are there in that area and in the lake, and also to keep the milfoil out of Lake Pleasant by eradicating it from the surrounding gravel ponds. And what's happened is our stewardship staff has gone out and done treatment efforts over several years, and they are using the infestation management record type in iMapInvasives to group together all of the data, so all of the observations, the surveys, and the treatments that relate to Eurasian water milfoil at Lake Pleasant. And here's a screenshot of just some information that's being found there. This is the observation data that's being found in the gravel ponds in Lake Pleasant. Okay, it's an example of how the infestation management record is being used. A cool example in 2015 is for starry stonewort, which is an interesting invasive species. It was found in the Presque Isle Lagoon. That was actually found by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection when they conducted a survey for this particular species. Did find it. And so it's actually an invasive alga, and it is still considered to be fairly rare in Pennsylvania, which we hope that it stays that way. And the only confirmed population is in Erie, Pennsylvania. Okay. And the reason why this one is going to be an issue is because, like many other invasives, it is able to form a very dense monoculture. and can grow into basically a blanket that can be up to 3.5 meters thick, which is pretty dense. Results of their survey, as you can see here in the top image in 2012 and the bottom image in 2015, the difference of those years, a significant expansion of stoneworts did occur in the lagoons. Ecological impacts are already being apparent. The estimated infested area in the 2015 imagery is estimated to be 13.6 acres large. So it's big, something that we are concerned about because Presque Isle is a really, really awesome place as far as biodiversity goes, and it is a really unique place. If you haven't been to Presque Isle before, I would definitely recommend going. So again, this is a place that we want to keep tabs on to ensure that that starry stonewort does not continue to spread. Another cool story I want to share is something that was done by a professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and she is using iMapInvasives data to do spatial modeling research. And so the professor's name is Bethany Bradley, and she did research last year in 2016 where she and her students compiled data sets on invasive plants in the Northeast U.S., and of course did include data that was from iMapInvasives. And the purpose of their research was to create regional risk assessments and to answer a question, which is, can the frequency of occurrences be used to predict abundance? And so from their research indicated that there is no relationship between number of occurrences, or in other words, observation data, and abundance or assessment data. So you can't look at the number of observations in an area and predict how abundant a particular species is. You just can't do it. The data isn't set up to do that. So by studying this, they were able to figure out that because you can't use occurrence data alone to understand potential plant abundance, more abundance data actually needs to be collected in the form of assessment data as far as iMapInvasives goes. Okay, the importance of that, the abundance data specifically, is going to be helpful for land managers and other folks that want to have a better understanding of on-the-ground density and threats being presented to invasive species based on population size. And so the ultimate takeaway from that story is go in and start recording assessment data at the same time that you're going in and recording observation data, because they are both very important. And this particular study has shown that especially assessment data is very much needed as far as better understanding on-the-ground efforts. BioBlitz information, I want to go through this quickly because we're starting to wrap up as far as time goes. But we do have data in iMap from several BioBlitzes that have happened in our state so far. And if you or your organization is thinking about doing a BioBlitz in the future, please consider sharing your invasive species data with us. We would love to incorporate that into our database. The story I want to share with you before we wrap up is about the Natural Heritage Program here in Pennsylvania and how we are doing work to combat invasive species, particularly in Erie County, in a special place called Mercyhurst Bend, which is a natural heritage area, or an NHA, known to support rare, threatened, or endangered species, as well as particular plant communities that are rare or exceptional in our state. So in 2015, we did conduct some treatment efforts there in the fall, and that information was captured in iMapInvasives as far as the treatment goes. And so you can see a screenshot there of the green polygon representing the treatment effort. And so the importance of capturing that data in iMapInvasives is the following. So years down the road, we can look back on that data and know how large the treated area was, the date the treatment occurred, and the specific invasive species that were treated. So any other registered user can look at this treatment data and use that, or talk to the people who were part of it if that's an interest, and potentially new partnerships could be formed. There's other people in the area that we aren't aware of that maybe are interested in also treating this location or doing similar work with similar species. This, again, is something that you could use to collaborate on with other folks. I'm going to skip through. I think we are kind of out of time, unfortunately, for questions. But I do want to just say thank you to everybody for being on the webinar today. Really appreciate your participation. And thanks again to Nancy and to Nick for being guest presenters. And so if there are any questions, since we ran out of time, please feel free to contact me via email or phone if you do have anything you would like to know about. But I'll just thank you and have a great rest of your day.